My son-in-law leaned back in his chair and said it like he was telling me the weather. "You know, Dad, that truck of yours is worth good money. You should sell it. Help us get ahead a little." I set my coffee mug down on the table. Slowly. The way you do when you need a second to decide if what you just heard was real. My daughter was looking at her phone. "That truck," I said, "belonged to your grandfather." He shrugged. "Right, but he's gone, and it's just sitting in the driveway." I looked at him across the kitchen table I'd built with my own hands 30 years ago. The same table where my wife had served Thanksgiving dinner every year until she couldn't anymore. The same table where my daughter had done her homework, cried over boys, and told me she was getting married to this man sitting here telling me to liquidate my father's legacy for their mortgage gap. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "I'll think about it," I said, but I already had. I drove home that evening the long way, down Route 9 past the old hardware store that used to be mine, past the diner where my wife and I had coffee every Saturday morning for 22 years. The truck hummed steady beneath me. A 1987 Ford F-150. Dark green. One dent above the rear wheel well from a fence post my father backed into in 1994. He'd cursed about it for a week, and then never fixed it. Said it gave the truck character. I'd driven this truck to the hospital the night my daughter was born. I'd driven it to my wife's last appointment, the one where the doctor used the word hospice for the first time. I'd driven it to the funeral, and then driven it home alone and sat in the driveway for 45 minutes before I could make myself go inside. My son-in-law wanted me to sell it. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and a yellow legal pad, old habit from my hardware store days. Whenever a supplier tried to edge me out, or a contractor tried to underbid me into the ground, I wrote things down. Numbers, dates, names, not as threats, as clarity. I started writing. The down payment on their first house, $40,000, a loan that had never once been mentioned for repayment. My daughter's car, because hers had too many miles. The fence they'd wanted around the backyard so their dog could run free. A new furnace last January, because mine could wait, they'd said. Mine could wait. I filled one page, then another. By the time I set the pen down, I had documented just under $90,000 over 6 years. $90,000 I'd given from the sale of the hardware store, from my retirement savings, from a life of early mornings and late nights, and a wife who'd kept every receipt in a shoebox under the bed because she believed in knowing exactly where things stood. I looked at the legal pad for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called my younger brother. He answered on the second ring, the way he always did, like he'd been sitting there waiting. "Everything all right?" he asked. "I need to talk to a financial advisor," I said. "Someone good. Not someone who'll shake my hand and charge me $500 to tell me what I already know." He was quiet a moment. "I know a woman. She helped me after Carol passed. She's straight with you. Set it up," I said. I slept better that night than I had in months. The advisor's name was Patricia. She worked out of a small office downtown, second floor, above a dry cleaning shop. The kind of office that tells you right away that the person inside is more interested in the work than the impression. Books stacked on the floor. A plant that was doing its best. A handshake that meant business. I sat down and put my legal pad on her desk. She looked at the numbers without reacting. That impressed me. "How long?" she asked. 6 years. "Written agreement?" "Family," I said, which was its own answer. She nodded slowly. "And what do you want to do going forward?" I told her. I told her about the truck. I told her about the furnace that could wait. I told her about the way my son-in-law looked at my possessions like he was doing inventory. I told her that my daughter, who I loved more than anything left in this world, had somewhere along the way stopped asking how I was doing and started asking what I could do. Patricia listened without interrupting, which is rarer than people think. When I finished, she folded her hands on the desk. "You're not here for permission," she said. "You already know what needs to happen." "I need a plan," I said. "Something that holds." We talked for 2 hours. By the time I walked back down to the street, I had a folder under my arm and a list of 3 appointments to make. A new financial advisor for my retirement accounts, an estate attorney on Birch Street who'd been recommended twice, and a conversation I wasn't looking forward to but wasn't going to keep avoiding. I drove home past the diner and stopped in for coffee, just because I could, just because it was mine to do. The waitress, a woman about my age with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, refilled my cup without asking. "Haven't seen you in a while," she said. "Been busy," I said. "Good busy, or the other kind?" I thought about it. "Transitional," I said. She laughed. "That's a polite word for it." The estate attorney's name was Gerald. He was in his 60s, deliberate, the kind of man who paused before every sentence because he believed words mattered. His office smelled like wood and old paper, which I found reassuring. I told him the situation without editorializing. He asked questions the way a good doctor does, not to judge, but to understand the full picture. "Your current will," he said, "leaves everything to your daughter?" "Written the year my wife died," I said. I was in no condition to be making permanent decisions, but it needed to be done. He nodded. "And now?" "Now I want it to reflect what I actually believe," I said, "not what I was too tired to think through." We talked about the truck. I told him about my nephew, my older brother's boy, who lived up in Vermont, worked with his hands, called me on my birthday every year without fail, and once drove 6 hours in a snowstorm because I'd mentioned offhand that I wasn't feeling well. He hadn't told me he was coming. Just showed up at the door with soup and a deck of cards. "He gets the truck," I said. Gerald didn't blink. "And the house?" That took longer to answer. My wife had picked out the house. She'd walked through 17 properties before she stepped into this one and turned to me with that expression that meant the conversation was over. We'd raised our daughter here, painted every room at least twice, replaced the back porch boards 3 summers in a row because I kept using the wrong wood for the climate. My wife had found that funnier each time. "The house goes into a trust," I said finally, "managed by my brother. My daughter can live in it if she needs to, under conditions. When I go, if there's equity, half goes to a scholarship fund through the technical college here in town. My wife taught there for 4 years. They have a workshop program she used to talk about." Gerald wrote everything down without comment. That was the right way to do it. "Your son-in-law," he said carefully, "has no claim to any of this under current law. But I want to make sure the language is airtight." "Make it airtight," I said. On the way home, I stopped at the bank. I asked to speak with someone about my accounts, specifically about removing a secondary contact who'd been added 3 years ago during a period when I'd thought convenience was the same thing as trust. The young man behind the desk processed the change without ceremony. His nameplate said Derek, and he had the focused politeness of someone who understood that money was never really about money. "Anything else, Mr. Callahan?" he asked. "Not today," I said. I drove home with the windows down. It was a Tuesday in October, the air cold but not bitter yet. The kind of day that makes you glad you live somewhere with seasons. My daughter called that evening. She asked if I was coming to dinner on Sunday. I said I'd let her know. She paused, which meant she'd noticed something in my voice. "Everything okay, Dad?" "Everything's fine," I said. "I've just been doing some organizing." "Organizing what?" "My affairs," I said. "It's overdue." Another pause. "You're not sick, are you?" "No," I said. "Just awake." She didn't know what to do with that. We said goodnight, and I sat in the kitchen afterward with the lights low and a cup of decaf my wife had always called "why bother coffee." I drank it anyway. She'd been right about a lot of things, but not that. The phone rang again around 9. My son-in-law. I let it go to voicemail. His message was careful, rehearsed sounding. "Just checking in, Dad. Wanted to apologize if the thing about the truck came out wrong. You know I respect that it has sentimental value. Just thinking out loud. Anyway, give us a call." I played it twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because I wanted to notice what wasn't in it. No question about how I was doing. No acknowledgement that what he'd said was wrong, only that it had come out wrong, which was a different thing entirely. An apology to the delivery, not the content. I deleted it. I went to bed and read for an hour. My wife's copy of a novel she'd never finished, a bookmark still in it at page 211 where she'd left off. I didn't read past her bookmark. I just read up to it sometimes. A few pages, then put it down. It was a way of being near her without pretending she was still here. Sunday came and I drove to their house for dinner. I'd decided to go. Not because I'd been persuaded, but because I wanted to see it clearly, in real time, with fresh eyes. When you're planning a change, you need to understand exactly what you're changing from. My son-in-law grilled steaks. He was good at it. I'd give him that. He had a way of performing ease that used to read to me as warmth. Now, it read as practice. My daughter made a salad and poured wine and talked about her work. A project she was managing, some colleagues who were difficult. She was good at her job, had always been good at things she cared about. I watched her move around the kitchen and remembered her at 7, standing on a step stool to help her mother make pie crust, her small hands pressing down with absolute focus. That was still in there somewhere. After dinner, my son-in-law brought up a kitchen renovation. They'd been talking about it, he said. Just a refresh. New counters, maybe an island. The quotes were higher than expected. He looked at me the way he always did when money was nearby. Not directly. Sidelong. It's a good investment, he said. Adds real value to the property. I'm sure it does, I said. My daughter said nothing, which was its own answer. I drove home and didn't turn the radio on. I liked the quiet now. I'd spent a long time filling silences, because silence after my wife passed had felt like something was wrong. Now it felt like honesty. 3 days later, I called my daughter, not my son-in-law, her. She answered at lunch. I could hear the sounds of her office in the background. Can you talk? I asked. Give me a second. A door closed. The background noise disappeared. Okay. What's up? I need to tell you some things, I said. I'd rather do it this way than in person, because in person I'll watch your face and start softening things. She was quiet. Okay. I've updated my will, I said. And my financial accounts. Your name is still in the will, but the structure has changed. You'll receive something. But the house is in a trust now, and the terms are different than before. Silence. Dad, let me finish. I've also closed the automatic transfer I set up to help with your mortgage. And I've asked the bank to remove Marcus from my secondary contact. Why would you? Because he asked me to sell my father's truck, I said. And that was the last thing on a long list. Her voice changed. Tighter. You're punishing us. I'm protecting myself, I said. Those are different. Because of one comment about a truck? No, I said. Because of $90,000 and one comment about a truck. Silence again. Longer this time. I didn't know it was that much, she said. Quieter now. I know you didn't, I said. Because you never asked. I heard her breathing. I waited. I don't know what to say, she said. You don't have to say anything today. I just wanted you to hear it from me, not from a letter or a changed account statement. Are you angry? I thought about that honestly. No, I said. I'm disappointed, but not in the way I used to be. Before, I was disappointed that you didn't appreciate things. Now I understand the situation better. I made it too easy. I kept saying yes before you finished asking. That taught you something I didn't mean to teach. She didn't respond for a long time. Then, can I come over? Not today, I said. Give it a few days. Let things settle. After we hung up, I sat on the back porch in my old canvas chair. The yard was quiet. A squirrel moved through the maple tree at the back of the lot, unhurried. My wife had put a bird feeder out there that I kept refilling even though I'd never once cared about birds before she did. Now I cared about them for her. My nephew called that Friday. He called most Fridays. His name was, "How are you holding up?" he asked. I told him the outline. Not everything, but enough. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Good. Just that. Good. I'm putting the truck in your name," I said. Eventually. It's in the will. The silence that followed was different from my daughter's silence. This one had weight in it. The kind that comes when someone understands what they've been given before they've said thank you. "Uncle Ray," he said finally. "I know," I said. "I'll take care of it." "I know that too," I said. The next few weeks were quiet. My son-in-law didn't call. My daughter called twice, brief conversations, careful, both of us measuring words like we were testing ice. I didn't make it easier for her. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd spent years making things easier when the harder version would have served us both better. On a Tuesday morning, I drove to the technical college on the east side of town. My wife had taught continuing education there, woodworking and basic home repair, practical courses designed for people who needed skills, not credentials. She'd loved those classes. She used to come home describing her students: a retired nurse who wanted to build her own garden beds, a young father learning to fix what was broken in his house, a woman in her 60s who'd never owned a tool in her life, and by week 4 was cutting dovetail joints. I asked to speak with someone in the development office. A woman named Sandra met me in a small conference room. I told her about my wife, about the workshop program, about what I had in mind. I didn't have exact numbers yet. That would come later with Gerald and Patricia. But I wanted to plant the conversation. Sandra listened carefully. When I finished, she said, "Your wife taught here?" "4 years," I said. "She always said the students taught her more." Sandra looked at a framed photo on the wall behind me. I turned. A class photo from the workshop program. About a dozen people standing around a workbench, holding projects, smiling. My wife wasn't in it. Wrong year. But the spirit of it was hers. "We'd be proud to name something after her," Sandra said. I drove home with the windows down again. My daughter came over on a Saturday afternoon, alone. My son-in-law wasn't with her, which told me she'd chosen that deliberately. She stood at the door holding a paper bag from the bakery down the street, 2 coffees and something wrapped in wax paper. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me," she said. "You're my daughter," I said, stepping back. "Come in." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table that had been there through everything. She unwrapped the pastries. We ate without talking for a while, the way people do when they're deciding where to begin. "I talked to Marcus," she said finally. I waited. "He's angry," she said. "He thinks you're being irrational." "I know he does," I said. "I don't think you're irrational," she said quietly. I think I knew this was coming and I kept not looking at it. That was more than I'd expected from her, and I told her so. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. She looked like her mother when she did that, the same way of holding warmth like it might leave. "I didn't know about all of it," she said. "The total. I knew about the house down payment and the car and the furnace, but I didn't add it up." "I did," I said. "That's the difference between us," she said. It wasn't an excuse, just a fact. "Your mother would have added it up," I said. "She would have told you to add it up. She was better at that than I was." My daughter's eyes filled. She looked away toward the window. Outside, the maple tree had gone mostly bare, a few stubborn leaves holding on. "Do you remember what she told you before she died?" I asked. My daughter looked back at me. "She told me a lot of things. She told you to take care of me," I said. "Not financially. She meant check on me. Show up." She knew I wouldn't ask. A tear moved down my daughter's face. She didn't wipe it. "I haven't done that," she said. "No," I said. "You haven't." We sat in that honesty for a while without trying to fix it. That, I'd learned, was sometimes the most respectful thing you could do. Not rush past the truth. Let it sit there and be seen. "Can I come back next weekend?" she asked. "Just me." "Yes," I said. "Bring nothing." She almost smiled. "Nothing? You don't have to bring something every time," I said. "That's something your mother said too. She said you always showed up with something in your hands because you were nervous your company wasn't enough." My daughter looked at me for a long moment. "It's not enough," she said. "I know that. Start there," I said. "The rest will take time." After she left, I went to the garage. I ran my hand along the side of the truck, the cold metal smooth under my fingers, the dent above the wheel well exactly where my father had backed into that fence post. I stood there for a while in the quiet dark. My father had given me this truck the summer I turned 42. He'd driven it to my house, handed me the keys on the porch, and said, "You'll know what to do with it." He didn't explain what he meant. He'd never been a man who explained things. He trusted that meaning would arrive when you were ready for it. I thought I understood now. Some things you don't sell, Not because they're worth more as objects than as money, but because money can be replaced, and some objects are the last conversation you'll ever have with someone who loved you without conditions. I locked the garage and went inside. The following weeks found their rhythm. My daughter came on Saturdays. We made lunch, talked about her work, about my wife, sometimes about nothing at all. My son-in-law was still distant, still processing, which I understood. He was a man who'd believed the arrangement would continue indefinitely. The ground shifting was disorienting. I didn't need his approval for that to be necessary. Tommy drove down from Vermont on a Thursday, unannounced, the way he did. He showed up at the door with a bag of tools and asked if anything needed fixing around the house. We spent the afternoon replacing the back porch boards for what I hoped was the final time. He'd brought the right wood. He always brought the right thing. "Your girl doing better?" he asked, not looking up from the work. "Working on it," I said. He nodded. "That's what you can ask for." We worked until the light went flat. Then we went inside and I made sandwiches and we ate standing at the kitchen counter the way men do when the table feels too formal for what they're feeling. "She looks like Aunt Helen," Tommy said, meaning my wife. He'd pulled out a photo from the refrigerator door, a photo of my daughter at maybe 15, standing in the driveway squinting against the sun. "I know," I said. "That probably makes it harder." "It makes it everything," I said. He put the photo back gently. We didn't say anything else about it. We didn't need to. A few days after Tommy left, a letter arrived. Not from my daughter, from my son-in-law, handwritten on regular notebook paper, which surprised me. Marcus was a typed memo kind of man. The letter was short, 5 sentences. "Ray, I know I've handled things badly. I've been thinking about the truck. I shouldn't have said what I said. I don't have a good reason for it except that I stopped thinking of you as a person and started thinking of you as a resource. I'm sorry for that." I read it twice. 5 sentences. More honesty than I'd heard from him in 6 years. I put the letter in the drawer of my writing desk, next to the photograph of my wife at our wedding, the one where she's laughing at something off camera, something I'd said that I could no longer remember. I kept it there because I liked the company. Some things you keep because they're evidence of who you were. Some things you keep because they're evidence of who someone else decided to become. The scholarship fund was finalized in early December. Gerald handled the paperwork. Patricia handled the money. Sandra at the college handled the rest. My wife's name would be on a workshop bay in the continuing education building. A small plaque. Wood, not metal. Because she would have wanted wood. I didn't tell my daughter until it was done. When I did, she was quiet on the phone for a long time. "She would have loved that," she said. "I know," I said. "That's why." Christmas that year was small. My daughter came, without my son-in-law, who had plans with his own family, she said, which was honest enough. Tommy and his wife drove down with their 2 kids, and we ate too much and stayed too late, and my nephew's youngest fell asleep on the couch under my wife's old quilt, and I sat in the armchair across the room and just watched the quiet of it. Not everything was repaired. Some of it wouldn't be. Not fully. My son-in-law and I would find a working distance. Eventually. My daughter and I were still building something new from the rubble of what we'd let become automatic. These things take time, and they should. Anything repaired too fast holds wrong. But the truck was in the garage. The house was in order. My wife's name was on a workshop where someone, right now, was probably learning how to hold a tool for the first time and discovering that they were capable of making something that would last. I was 67 years old, and I had stopped waiting for someone to tell me my presence was valuable. I'd stopped making myself useful as a substitution for being loved. I'd stopped keeping the door open so wide that anyone could walk through and walk out carrying something that was mine. I'd learned, later than I should have, that the most generous thing you can do for the people who take you for granted is to stop, not out of cruelty, out of respect. Respect for yourself and, if they're capable of it, respect for them. Because nothing grows in ground that's never asked to hold its own weight. My wife knew this. She'd tried to teach it to me in her quiet way for years. I was a slow student, but I got there. The morning after Christmas, I took the truck out before sunrise, drove down Route 9, past the hardware store, Past the diner, out past the edge of town, where the road runs straight and flat, and the sky gets big above the fields. The heater ran a little loud. The dent above the wheel well caught a flicker of the early light. I drove until the sun was fully up. Then I turned around and headed home. The house was waiting. So was the coffee. So was whatever came next. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that was more than enough.